Hey everyone, Dark Magician of Team Sorcerers here, and welcome back to another Robot Wars What If. And this one is going to be about Wild Thing, one of the best robots from Robot Wars who hasn't been that successful. Well, besides making 4 series semi-finals, and yeah, Wild Thing has taken on the best of the best in its time. Panic Attack, Hypno-Disc, Chaos 2, Razor, Tornado, Firestorm 3. Truly an amazing machine that just never gives up and keeps coming back and back, even if it doesn't always win. But this brings me to a certain situation in Series 4 when it took on Hypno-Disc. It put up a good fight against Hypno-Disc, despite taking damage, but of course it lost on that judge's decision. But it does make me wonder if the decision went in Wild Thing's favour, or if it somehow managed to win. It would have to either push Hypno-Disc down the pit somehow, or just ram it against the wall and hope it breaks down. But either way, this brings me to the main topic. What if Wild Thing managed to beat Hypno-Disc? What would happen then? How much would change? Well, it would be a major upset. I'd be disappointed, considering at that point this was the early days of when Hypno-Disc was my favourite robot. So with this, Wild Thing goes through to the grand final. I mean, already Series 4 was Wild Thing's best year, considering that was the only time it got past round 1 of the semi-finals. So, yeah, Wild Thing is in the grand final instead. And then it goes up against Pussycat. Now, unfortunately, Wild Thing can't really do anything to Pussycat here. I mean, maybe the Series 5 version would have had a chance, as I talked about it in another Robot Wars What If, because Wild Thing would have had the disc, but this time, like, all it's got is the lifting arm, which does nothing against Pussycat, and Pussycat can just keep coming at Wild Thing and will just keep doing damage. Not a lot of damage, but still damage nonetheless. And they'd still keep going, and it would go to a judge's decision, and Pussycat would get it. And there would be a playoff this time, and Wild Thing would then have to face Stinger. But again, it's another robot that Wild Thing can't really do anything against. Well, not this version anyway. And it can't really push it around that easily. If it tries, then Stinger just rolls off the wedge, gets out of the way. And Stinger would just pummel Wild Thing with the mace, and this would keep going, and then Stinger wins on a judge's decision and takes the bronze. Meanwhile, the grand final between Chaos 2 and Pussycat just plays out the same way. So yeah, there will be a different seeding lineup because of this. I'm not really sure where to put Razor here, but but I would guess Razor would either be 4th or 5th. The problem is the Series 5 seedings were done in a bit of a weird order. Because they had Razor seeded 4th, despite Razor being a Heat finalist, but then again, that would be because of its World Championship title status. And Stinger was seeded 3rd, and no, Hypno-Disc was seeded 3rd, and Stinger was seeded 5th. So this is a tricky one. Either Razor would still be seeded 4th, or it would be seeded 5. Then again, the fact that there was a 3rd place playoff in this timeline does help, whereas in the real timeline there wasn't a playoff because Hypno-Disc was too badly damaged to do it. So I think Razor would be seeded 5th here. So Chaos 2 and Pussycat are still seeded 1 and 2 respectively, but this time Stinger would be 3rd and Wild Thing would be 4th. And then Hypno-Disc would in fact be seeded 6th here. Panic Attack 7th, Firestorm 3 would be 8th, 3 Stegs to Heaven would be seeded 9th, and everyone else just stays the same. So that's how the seeding lineup would probably be for Series 5. So going into Series 5, first heat, nothing changes. That still plays out the same way because, well, there's no change in the seedings. So yeah, Heat B, Stinger and Hippopotamus are actually in this one instead of Hypno-Disc and Black Widow. So that fight plays out the same way, and so do the other fights in Heat B. This then brings means that Atomic would then face Stinger. Now Stinger would put up a decent fight, but I don't think it would get any further. Atomic would just flip it all over the place. Yeah, I can see this going the same way as the fight with Chaos 2. Stinger can't really do much to Atomic. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Atomic is able to flip it out the arena, but either way, Stinger gets eliminated, which would be a major surprise, considering it finished 3rd. So yeah, with Stinger out, Atomic goes through to the Heat final and will face Bulldog Breed in a flipper frenzy. But I don't see Bulldog Breed beating Atomic, really. I mean, it might flip it over a couple of times, but Atomic is quicker and just has a better designed flipper. Like, no disrespect to Bulldog Breed, or at least this version of Bulldog Breed. I can see Bulldog Breed being just left on its back or getting flipped out, and Atomic goes through to the series semi-finals. Next heat, Heat C, Razor and Big Nipper are there instead of Stinger and Hippopotamus. That fight plays out the same way, and so do the other fights in Heat C. Then Razor would take on General Carnage 2 and just crush it. And then it'll face S3 in the Heat final, so they meet like 2 rounds earlier than they actually do in the original timeline, and, well, it just plays out the exact same way, really. Depending on whether or not Sir Killalot would have been in this fight instead, instead of dead metal, because I know in that heat final, Killalot and Shunt were there, whereas in their actual fight in the actual timeline, it was dead metal and Shunt. Either way, this house robots shouldn't really change much here, and Razor actually gets through to the semi-finals. So yeah, Heat D, we now have Panic Attack and Barbarous here instead of Firestorm 3 and Decapitator. And again, that plays out the same way, so do the other fights. Then Panic Attack takes on Sir Chromalot, and yeah, Chromalot doesn't really stand a chance here. It can't. It would just be too difficult to try and lift Panic Attack, but even then, Panic Attack will just end up flipping Sir Chromalot over. So Panic Attack goes through, and then we'll take on Reactor 2, which also can't really do much. I mean, Panic Attack will just keep flipping it over, and even though Reactor 2 will just keep getting up, there's just nothing it can really do. So, regardless of whether it goes to a judge's decision or not, Panic Attack goes through to the semi-finals. Then next heat, Heat E, and of course 3 Stakes to Heaven and 11 are here instead of Wild Thing and Trouble and Strife. So yeah, again, that plays out the same way, so does the rest of the battles. And then of course there ends up being a rematch between 3 Stegs and Napalm from Series 3. Now it's hard to say who would win in this scenario, because I know at some point in round 2, 3 Stegs loses drive on one side. It's hard to say how soon this happens, but 3 Stegs can just fairly quickly come at Napalm, turn around and just hit it with the disc. It's hard to say how much damage it will do. I know in the actual timeline, Wild Thing just rushed at it, Napalm with the disc, and just one hit caused it to break down. But I'm not sure if 3 Stakes would be able to do the same thing here. I mean, the disc would do some damage, but I don't know if the force of it would cause Napalm to break down. But it would get some consistent hits in for a while, and Napalm can't really do anything. But then, of course, 3 Stegs starts to have some problems. And then it loses drive on one side again, and it's just spinning around in circles. And yeah, the whole fight would just turn here. I mean, Napalm can still freely move around, even though it's a bit slow, and yeah, 3 Stegs would just be left for dead and get counted out, and Napalm would go through to the heat final for the first time since Series 3. But then I feel like its luck would definitely run out, because it's no match for Prize Fighter Map 2. So yeah, Prize Fighter would attempt to flip Napalm a few times before successfully tipping it on its side and going through to the semi-finals. Of course, even if 3 Stegs did beat Napalm here, I think Prize Fighter would just do the same thing. Flip 3 Stegs up on its side and leave it there and just go through. Either way, I feel like Prize Fighter is the stronger robot in this heat and will go through. heat F, G and H, literally nothing changes. So then we go on to heat I, where Firestorm 3 and Decapitator are there instead of 3 Stegs and 11. So again, that plays out, so do the other fights. Then Firestorm would go up against Tetanus and just flip it over very quickly. And then would face Bigger Brother in the Heat final and just beat it. I mean, Bigger Brother always puts up a good fight, but I don't really see any scenario where Bigger Brother comes out on top. I mean, because every time they fought, Firestorm usually wins anyway. Well, except that one time in the last All-Stars tournament after Series 7, where Firestorm drove into the pit, but that doesn't count. That's another what if I'll cover in the future. What if Firestorm didn't nosedive into the pit? So either way, Firestorm goes through to the semi-finals. So yeah, already there's some big changes, as you may have noticed. Stinger doesn't make it to the Heat final, and S3 and Bigger Brother don't make it to the semi-finals, which will change a lot in the long run. So yeah, Heat J, Hypno-Disc's heat is finally up. So yeah, it beats Black Widow, the other fights play out the same, and then Hypno-Disc would go up against Tiberius 2. I don't know whether or not Tiberius 2 would be able to get at Hypno-Disc and crush it. I'm not sure it would be fast enough, considering Hypno-Disc is at its absolute best during Series 5, and the Hypno-Disc would just keep clobbering Tiberius. Yeah, it should be a somewhat easy win. Maybe Tiberius might get a lucky pinch at one point, but not on the disc. I don't know, but Hypno-Disc is more likely to win this encounter, and then has an easier time in the Heat final when it faces Cat 3. Yeah, Cat 3 has no chance here. It just gets absolutely ripped apart by Hypno-Disc. Bits will just be sent flying throughout the arena. One of its wheels would get ripped off, and it just shuts down. And yeah, after one of its most destructive victories, Hypno-Disc goes through to the semi-finals. So then, Heat K, Wild Thing is finally up. Yeah, the fight with Trouble and Strife goes the same way, so do the other battles. Then it goes up against Widow's Revenge. But Widow's Revenge can't really do much against Wild Thing, so Wild Thing just pushes it around, maybe knocks off the rolling pin at the back, and it's just an easy win for Wild Thing. But then it would go up against Rick, and it's hard to say how this would go. I mean, Rick would definitely get a few flips in on Wild Thing. Maybe Wild Thing could do a bit of damage to Rick, but I'm not sure how much it would do. Maybe a wheel guard would come off. I don't know. Rick's tyres seem to be well protected at the side, so I'm not sure they'd be damaged that easily. I mean, Rick would definitely be aggressive and keep toppling Wild Thing over and over again, and just keep doing so. Um, uh, but yeah, in all honesty, I think Rick would actually come out on top here. Um, and yeah, it would be another shock. The Wild Thing gets beaten, and Rick goes through to the semi-finals. And then the last heat, literally nothing changes. So, going into the series semi-finals, we then have Razor against Firestorm 3, like 2 rounds earlier than in the actual timeline. Chaos 2 would face Prize Fighter Mac 2, and Spawn again would face Rick. So Razor versus Firestorm, well, that literally plays out the same way as in the actual timeline of Series 5. Which will put a lot of pressure on Firestorm for the next round. Chaos 2 beats Prize Fighter with not too many problems. And as for Spawn again against Rick, I mean, Rick might not get a chance to flip Spawn again. For I can see Spawn again flipping Rick all over the place and even out the arena. So, yeah, Spawn again finally gets beyond round 1 of the semi-finals here. So the loser's melee is a flipper frenzy. And and the pressure's on for the Firestorm team. Now, in the actual timeline, the team didn't really need to fix the flipper, because in the 3rd place playoff it was facing Hypno-Disc. So they didn't need to worry about being flipped over. Plus, it was the playoff, so it didn't really matter. But this time, the team have to work harder than ever to try and get Firestorm ready in time. So I think they would have done. It didn't look like there was that much work to do on it. Then again, I'm not an engineer or a welder, so I wouldn't know. But they should just about manage to get it ready in time. Of course, it also would depend if Prize Fighter and Rick could actually flip Firestorm over. Regardless, they're ready, but Firestorm is just the superior robot of the lot of them, just flipping them all over the place. It would more than likely go to a judge's decision, and Firestorm would take the win and get back into the main competition. And then would go on to face Chaos 2 while Razor fights Spawn again. That plays out the same way as in the actual timeline, with Spawn again crushed and pitted and Razor through to the grand final. Meanwhile, Firestorm takes on Chaos 2, and again it's another flipper frenzy, and they do flip each other over a few times. Again, it plays out in a similar way to the Bigger Brother versus Chaos 2 fight, but Chaos 2 gets flipped on its back, can't self-right, loses its title. So Firestorm gets revenge on what happened in Series 3 and goes through to the grand final. So, semi-final 2. Really Big Cheese faces Dominator 2 as usual. Nothing changes there. Then Panic Attack faces Atomic. Now, Panic Attack is having its interference problems at this point, and then again, it can't really do much to Atomic anyway, so Atomic does flip it over a few times. It's just a fairly simple win. Atomic wins that. Then Hypno-Disc faces Pussycat. And this would be their first time clashing instead of in Series 4, depending on whether or not the Series 5 semi-finals were filmed before or after the first Annihilator of Extreme 1. Now, I don't think this would play out the same way as the Series 4 fight in the actual timeline, considering Hypno-Disc has had modifications that just make it more manoeuvrable, better controlled. So I reckon Hypno-Disc could outmaneuver the blade of Pussycat more easily and get significant hits in, knocking off a caster and a wheel. I just genuinely think Hypno-Disc could win this encounter, but barely, maybe. I'm not underestimating Pussycat. Of course, then again, I don't think it would really matter who wins this. It depends. I mean, if Pussycat loses, then it's in the loser's melee with Panic Attack and Really Big Cheese. I don't think Really Big Cheese would be able to catch Pussycat and flip it out the arena, because it's too quick and nippy. And Really Big Cheese ends up breaking down. Panic Attack is still having internal problems, but it doesn't matter anyway, because Pussycat can just shred Panic Attack, like it did in the actual timeline, and Pussycat wins on a judge's decision. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, Pussycat did beat Hypno-Disc. Either robot should easily be repaired in time for the loser's melee anyway, depending. Again, Hypno-Disc could keep out the way of Really Big Cheese's flipper, have it a repeat performance of that mayhem. It would knock the wheels, just slice them, put them out of shape. Really Big Cheese breaks down, and Panic Attack still has problems. Hypno-Disc just about gets out of the way of the forks, shreds the side skirts off Panic Attack, and that's the end of that. So, either way, either Pussycat and Hypno-Disc are going through to round 2, but of course they don't face each other. So who have we got? Pussycat, Hypno-Disc, Dominator 2, Atomic. So Pussycat would go on to face Atomic, and while Hypno-Disc faces Dominator 2. That's what they'd probably go with, considering they like to put the highest ranked robot up against the lowest, and then have the other two face off. That's what I've noticed. So yeah, the Hypno-Disc versus Dominator 2 fight, well, that plays out the same way as the actual timeline. But then, meanwhile, Pussycat clashes with Atomic, but I don't see Pussycat winning this, really. Maybe it'll leave some cuts on Atomic, but I think Atomic would just eject Pussycat from the arena, and Atomic would go through to the grand final. So yeah, that's two former grand finalists that Atomic took out alongside a former champion. So yeah, Atomic has a lot of success here. So basically we have near enough the same grand final lineup as in the actual timeline, only Atomic is there instead of Bigger Brother. So then what would then happen is Atomic would face Firestorm 3, and Razor and Hypno-Disc would clash. I mean, depending on whether or not they want a grand final between Hypno-Disc and Razor. It depends, although the thing is, like I said before, since Series 4, what they've done is have semi-finalists from a different semi-final face off in the grand final eliminators. So the producers probably wouldn't try and make that happen. So Firestorm versus Atomic. I mean, Firestorm would put up a fight, but I don't know. I'm not so sure whether or not it would beat Atomic. I mean, Chaos 2 was fairly easy for Firestorm. But then again, Chaos 2 was having its issues with the gas in the semi-finals. Sorry about that. But I just feel like it would get to a point where Atomic just flips Firestorm more easily than Firestorm can flip Atomic, and plus, you know, it's a wider flipper blade, so chances are Atomic will probably send Firestorm out the arena, or at least that's my best guess as to what would happen. I mean, it's hard to predict considering they haven't actually fought each other. Meanwhile, Hypno-Disc versus Razor. Now I did go over this matchup before in an earlier episode, and like I said, I just strongly feel that Series 5 Hypno-Disc could beat Series 5 Razor. I mean, someone did write down, it depends who gets to whom first in this era. But Hypno-Disc winning is the best guess here, considering that Pussycat did something to cause Razor to break down in the grudge match, and I feel a few hits from Hypno-Disc could make the same thing happen. I mean, nothing against Razor, I love Razor, but this is genuinely my best guess. I mean, mean, if they fought in Series 3 or 6, then Razor could beat Hypno-Disc very easily, but I don't think that would be the case in Series 4 or 5. So with this, Razor is eliminated and Hypno-Disc goes through to the grand final. So then Razor and Firestorm would fight again in the playoff. I guess it depends how fit to fight Razor is. Depending on the extent of the damage, they should be able to be ready in time. But then who'd win here? Well, Razor probably would still. I feel like this, again, could play out the same way as the second All-Stars Grand Final. Depending. But then again, it depends whether or not Razor could get through the armour still. I mean, it did in Extreme 2, but couldn't quite do it in the 5th Wars. So, yeah, it would be quite a struggle. But yeah, I guess it would go the same way as the earlier fight. It depends whether Razor could get to the flipper and crumple it out of shape. Yeah, this is a really tough call. I mean, I know in Extreme 2, the forwards and backwards drive of Firestorm got damaged, presumably when Razor went through the armour, but I don't think that would happen here. And it also depends whether or not Razor is fully functional after its fight with Hypno-Disc. Well, here's my best guess anyway. Firestorm 3 would start out strong, but I think ultimately it just becomes too much of a repeat of the previous fight. While Razor probably can't pierce through the armour, it would still leave dents, like on the pieces of the armour next to the flipper. So yeah, Razor just about scrapes another win on a judge's decision and finishes third. Which brings us to the grand final, Hypno-Disc against Atomic, and yeah, this is where Atomic's best run comes to an end. Yeah, it just plays out the exact same way as their fight in the real timeline. After having its best run yet, it just gets destroyed by Hypno-Disc. And Hypno-Disc is crowned the Series 5 champion. Kind of an interesting turn of events. In the 4th Wars, Atomic was beaten by the reigning champion, Chaos 2, and then it got beaten by the newly crowned champion, Hypno-Disc, in this timeline. as for the Series 6 seeds, I guess this is a bit of a nightmare to figure out, considering that Rick would be seeded and in the 6th series, because it seems like it just didn't qualify for the 6 floors in the original timeline, although was in fact in Extreme 2, so so here's how the seeding lineup would be. Obviously 1 Hypno-Disc, 2 Atomic. Oh yeah, Atomic would be in this as well, because apparently it's 2 didn't qualify for Series 6 in the real timeline, but because it's seeded, it would, so I'd have to they'd have to replace 2 other robots, but we'll get to that. So 3 Razor, 4 Firestorm 4, Chaos 2 would still be seeded, fifth, sorry, losing my trail of thought, Dominator 2 would still be seeded 6th, but this time Spawn again would be seeded 7th, Panic Attack would be 8th, thankfully it shouldn't be too hard to figure out the seeds, considering Prize Fighter doesn't return despite making the semis, because I read that it just simply didn't enter Series 6. So yeah, Panic Attack is 8th. Who else have we got here? Because Weedy Big Cheese doesn't return, and neither does Prize Fighter, so Rick would be seeded 9th, which just leaves 3 more spots. Oh, I don't think S3 would be seeded here, since it didn't make the semi-finals in this timeline. So I guess Wild Thing would be seeded 10th here, and Stinger would still be seeded 11th, and Tornado 12th. Oh wait, there's Bigger Brother to think about as well. Yeah, I guess Bigger Brother wouldn't be seeded in this timeline either, since it didn't even make it to the semi-finals in this timeline. But yeah, that's more likely going to be the lineup, unless Bigger Brother is seeded instead of Tornado. Man, this is tricky to figure out. Well, I guess Tornado would be, since, technically Tornado has had a bit more success, and it has got further than Bigger Brother, when they made 1 semi-final each. Yeah, that's what I'll go for. So yeah, S3 and Bigger Brother are not seeded here, so I've got to figure out who would replace whom. Okay, so based on the order of how things go, I would quite simply put Atomic in Bigger Brother's heat and Rick in S3's heat. But, yeah, we'll come to those in a bit. So, yeah, Series 6. I guess Hypno-Disc would just stay the same as it was in the Fifth Wars. Honestly, I don't know why it was modified into a somewhat weaker form for Series 6. I guess because Hypno-Disc is the champion, there wouldn't be much reason to change anything or anything much. So let's just assume that Hypno-Disc stays in its Series 5 form, which makes its heat a lot easier. Yeah, its heat is heat A instead of heat K, so nothing changes there. Then we have Razor's heat, which is heat B instead of heat A, nothing changes there. Heat C, well, it's still Chaos 2's heat, so nothing changes. And heat D, which is Spawn Again's heat instead of heat H, that doesn't change. Spawn Again wins. So, yeah, then we come to Rick's heat, heat E, which is S3's heat, and yeah, that's there instead of being heat D. So Rick would have to replace someone that was eliminated in round 1. The choices being Armadillo, Rhubarb, ICU, and GBH2. And I feel like because Armadillo seems to be the weakest, let's just say that this doesn't qualify and Rick takes its place. So yeah, Rick would be in S3's fight. So yeah, while Chromalot and the alien win the other fight, Rick faces off against S3, Shredder, and Rhubarb. Rhubarb, of course, still breaks down, and Shredder gets more shredded than usual. S3 does a lot of damage to it, and Rick just flips it about. So S3 and Rick go through. S3 will then go on to beat Chromalot, and I think Rick would beat the alien since the rear spinning hammer doesn't seem to be working properly. So Rick goes through, then faces S3 in the heat final, but unfortunately doesn't get much further. Its flipper can't really do much against S3, and S3 just keeps hitting it with the disc, tossing it about, and S3 goes through. And then heat F, well, that's Stinger's heat, nothing changes there. Same with heat G and Tornado. Now we've got Wild Thing's heat, that is heat H instead of heat E, and again, nothing changes, Wild Thing goes through. Heat I, Panic Attack's heat, nothing changes, Terahertz wins. So heat J, oh yeah, that's Dominator 2's heat, again, literally nothing changes. So then heat K, that's Firestorm 4's heat instead of heat B, again, nothing changes. And now we move on to heat L, the last heat, where Atomic is, and it's in Bigger Brother's heat. And the robots that lose here in the actual timeline are Reptilian, Major Tom, Tridente, and Derek 2. Of all of them, I would say Tridente seems to be the weakest one, and in this timeline, I don't think would have qualified. So in this case, Atomic replaces Tridente, but then has the pleasure of facing Behemoth, Disco Inferno, and Derek 2. I mean, Derek 2 is just no match for any of them, let's be honest. Disco Inferno does damage Behemoth quite a bit. But yeah, Atomic does also flip Behemoth and Derek 2 all over the place a bit. I don't know if Disco Inferno would be able to get at Atomic. I guess Atomic, recognising the danger, it would be able to keep out the way of the disc, as well. Disco Inferno isn't that manoeuvrable, and I think Atomic would get a lucky attack in on the side and flip it on the sidewall and get it out of the arena. Leaving Behemoth to go through. I guess that's one scenario that could happen. Of course, Behemoth would then go on to get beaten by Bigger Brother, while Atomic beats Killer Carrot 2. And then in the heat final, it's another flipper frenzy. But I'm not sure Bigger Brother would win this. I think Atomic is the stronger robot here, and Atomic would just flip Bigger Brother out and go through to the semi-finals. Of course, alternatively, Behemoth would be too badly damaged and be eliminated in round 1, so in which case Atomic faces Bigger Brother in round 2 and beats it, while Disco Inferno beats Killer Carrot 2, but because of Disco Inferno's problems in the heat final, I think it would get flipped out the arena or into the pit by Atomic. Either way, Atomic is going through to the series semi-finals. So, first semi-final. I guess we would have Hypno-Disc against S3, Razor against 13 Black, and Danton Kier against Spawn again. I was thinking about trying to put S3 and Danton Kier against each other and make it somewhat match the original timeline, but then it would be hard to figure out who Spawn again and Razor would face. I don't know if they'd have. I don't know if they do that really. Yeah, the first lineup is more likely. And I mean, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, S3 might have a chance against Hypno-Disc, but I feel like Hypno-Disc would just be too quick and manoeuvrable and would hit S3's wheels or just near the side of the disc. Maybe S3 could get some lucky strikes in on Hypno-Disc, but I don't think it would be enough to just stop Hypno-Disc in its tracks. I feel like Hypno-Disc would more likely win this encounter. Meanwhile, S3 against 13 black, this would play out pretty much the same way as the All-Stars fight, which makes me wonder how the All-Stars would play out in Extreme 2. So yeah, Razor beats 13 black. And then because Spawn again is still having some internal issues, Danton Kier would beat Spawn again here. So yeah, it would be an interesting losers melee, sort of a similar one to one in Series 5, because you've got S3, Spawn again, and 13 black. But Spawn again isn't likely to get through since it's still having some issues. I mean, I think S3 could get some lucky hits on the side of Spawn again and cause it to break down, or 13 black just tries to keep away from the flipper. So yeah, well, one of the spinners would more likely win. Now I don't think S3 would be able to flip 13 black over with the disc. I mean, it would damage the discs a little bit, but I think 13 black shouldn't have too much trouble clobbering S3. And in the end, just S3 just takes too much damage, and 13 black just about gets through. And then it would go up against Hypno-Disc in a spinner showdown. Meanwhile, Firestorm would fight Danton Kier, and it would play out the same way as their All-Stars fight, where after a few flips, Danton Kier just simply breaks down. Now, as for Hypno-Disc versus 13 black, this is a tricky one to call. I mean, 13 black doesn't seem that easy to control anyway. I mean, although this would require a lot of driving skill. I mean, Hypno-Disc should be quick and nippy enough to get out of the way of the disc, and chances are the discs could clash head on. I mean, chances are Hypno-Disc's disc will rip into any of 13 blacks. I mean, maybe if Hypno-Disc is lucky, it could get 13 black on the side, but we'd have to get out of the way rather quickly. And I guess this would just keep going and going. Now, it's hard to say whether or not a clash of the discs would cause Hypno-Disc to break down. Well, that has been an issue, like, quite later on in Rumble Wars Extreme 1, well, at least in the case of the Annihilator. It's hard to say for sure. I mean, I feel like if this momentum keeps up, I feel like Hypno-Disc could win on a judge's decision and just win it more on damage and control, more than anything else. But yeah, again, this is best guess. So, we move into semi-final number 2. So, a Firestorm 4 would face Tornado, Atomic would face Dominator 2, and a Wild Thing would face Terahertz. So, yeah, the Firestorm versus Tornado fight, well, that just plays out the same way as their real fight in the actual timeline. Atomic would beat Dominator 2, besides maybe getting in an axe blow or two. I don't think Dominator 2 would beat Atomic. Of course, the trouble is it's hard to say whether or not Dominator 2's axe could pierce Atomic's armour. It's hard to say, but either way, Atomic is more likely to win. Meanwhile, Wild Thing stands no chance against Terahertz. I mean, a Wild Thing can't really do anything to Terahertz. It would nudge it a few times, but the axe would just keep hitting it over and over again. And even if Wild Thing lasts, then Terahertz wins on a judge's decision. So, the losers melee, we have Firestorm, Dominator 2, and Wild Thing. All of these robots have faced each other before. And there was an interesting circle going on, because Dominator 2 beat Firestorm before, Wild Thing beat Dominator 2, and Firestorm beat Wild Thing. So that's an interesting little circle there. But Firestorm comes out on top this time. I mean, Dominator 2's axe can't puncture Firestorm's armour this time, and Wild Thing can't really do much to either of these robots either, so yeah, it's an easy win for Firestorm. Firestorm, I think, would then go up against Terahertz, while Tornado takes on Atomic. Because otherwise it would have been Atomic against Terahertz and Firestorm against Tornado, and they couldn't have those two robots fight again. So yeah, Tornado would face Atomic, and again, this is a really difficult one to predict since they've never fought each other. Tornado would more likely use the scoop, but it's difficult to anticipate who'd win. Tornado would shove Atomic around a bit at first, but I feel like Atomic could flip Tornado. And make things easier, but might probably. But would it make the mistake of turning Tornado back over? I mean, maybe it would, or maybe it wouldn't. I know Firestorm 4 did make that mistake, and it cost them the fight. But then again, afterwards, I noticed that it seems that Bigger Brother and Storm 2 would later on catch on to that. Because once they flipped Tornado over, they just left it on its back. And this is in the same semi-final fight, so chances are Atomic would capitalise on this and probably not flip Tornado back over, since they would realise that cost Firestorm 4 the fight. I mean, Tornado could probably still push Atomic around at the side, even though Atomic doesn't exactly have flat sides. It's sort of angled like that a bit, with a curve at the top. Um, then again, it might make the front wheels like leave the surface basically. But yeah, this would make it easier for Atomic to shove the Tornado around, and they probably would try and get Tornado out of the arena, and they would probably succeed in doing that, or just leave Tornado on the sidewall. So I actually think Atomic could probably beat Tornado, but barely. So that's another grand final victory for Atomic. So yeah, already that's another big change. Tornado doesn't make it to the grand final and doesn't win the title. Meanwhile, Firestorm and Terahertz clash, and unfortunately Terahertz would beat Firestorm here. I know that in the actual timeline Firestorm came out on top, but that was because of Terahertz breaking down, and I guess didn't fully recover from the fight with Razor. But this time we have a fully healthy Terahertz, and yeah, Terahertz just batters Firestorm, and it makes it lose a lot of manoeuvrability. It can't go forwards or backwards, and Terahertz just wins. So we have a slightly different grand final lineup. So we've got I just realised I might have cocked up somewhere. I don't know why I said Firestorm beats Danton Kier in semi-final 1. I meant Razor. So yeah, Razor would actually fight Danton Kier and beat it. So yeah, the grand final would actually be Hypno-Disc, Razor, Atomic and Terahertz. So yeah, there's a bit more variety here. So Hypno-Disc would face Terahertz and Razor would face Atomic. Now, it's difficult to say who win between Hypno-Disc and Terahertz since they haven't fought each other, as we have one of the greatest spinners of all time against the robot with the best axe ever. But I feel like Hypno-Disc could come out on top here. I think it would manage to keep out the way of the axe. Maybe there'd be a glancing blow between the weapons, but it could go pretty much the same way as the fight between Terahertz and Fluffy in the Fifth Wars, where Terahertz has a side panel ripped off, and then just gets immobilised, whether it's on one side or just completely. Yeah, Hypno-Disc is more likely to win here. Meanwhile, Razor versus Atomic. Well, this is a tough one. Well, maybe not that tough. I mean, they've never fought each other before, but I think Razor is more likely going to win against Atomic. I mean, it wouldn't be able to get under Razor that easily, and Razor can just grab Atomic and crush it. So yeah, Razor wins. And then in the playoff, I don't know whether or not Terahertz would be fit to fight, but chances are it probably wouldn't be. I mean, it might start well, but it could be a situation where it just ends up breaking down again, and Atomic would just barely come out alive and go through. So then we finally have the Dream Grand Final clash, Hypno-Disc against Razor. But yeah, it's really hard to say who would win this matchup. I mean, I'd like to think Razor would have had some modifications to stop it breaking down again. But yeah, it definitely seems more resilient than in the Fifth Wars for sure. So it probably wouldn't get to a point where Razor would break down. I mean, Hypno-Disc is more likely to win, considering they're both still in their Series 5 forms. It's really hard to predict, and ultimately it doesn't really matter, considering Hypno-Disc isn't able to return for Series 7. So if Hypno-Disc wins, then it won't be able to return to defend its title, which would be kind of awkward, and Razor would automatically be seeded number 1. So that would be the case either way, but yeah, it would be hard to anticipate in this situation. I mean, if Hypno-Disc was actually in its Series 6 form, like I said earlier, Razor would win easily. But since this is a Series 5 version of Hypno-Disc, it might be a different story. But I'd like to think Razor would have made modifications to prepare for a Hypno-Disc matchup and try and counter him after the defeat in Series 5 in this timeline. So this time there is a higher chance of Razor winning and finally winning the UK title. So yeah, that's this version of Series 6 in a nutshell. So going into Series 7, with no issues regarding Razor and Tornado, Razor does return for the 7th Wars in this timeline and is seeded number 1. But of course this time Atomic is seeded this time. So yeah, again, Ming Dynasty probably won't be seeded here. And Razor would replace it in Ming's fight, and either Ming wouldn't enter at all, or would just take Zorro's place. So in any case, it would be 1 Razor, 2 Atomic, Terahertz would still be seeded, seeded 3. Actually, then again, maybe I don't know. Would Bigger Brother be seeded here? Probably not, considering just like King Bee Powerworks, it would have had one semi-final victory and that's it. So anyway, 1 Razor, 2 Atomic, 3 Terahertz. Right. Let's see, we've got 13 Black, Tornado. Firestorm. Danton here. I guess Firestorm would still be seeded 4th here. So there's that. Tornado would be seeded 5. 13 Black would be 6th. Danton Kier would be 7th. Then Spawn again would actually be seeded 8th here. Yeah. Then 9 Panic Attack, 10 Pussycat, 11 Exterminator. No, 11 Behemoth, 12 Exterminator, 13 Bulldog Breed, 14 Smithy, 15 Thermidor 2. Yeah, that's basically how it would be, and the heats would be played in the correct order. And we've sort of gone over this before, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah. So yeah, Razor would win Heat A, Grim Reaper B, Tornado C, Danton Kier D, Tough as Nails E, Mute F, oh, hold the phone. Ming would be in this one because Atomic and Smithy can't be in the same battle here, so yeah, Ming would just replace Atomic in that fight. So G, Bulldog Breed, Thermidor 2H, Storm 2I, now Smidsy's Heat J. I can't remember if I've gone over this before, but yeah, Smidsy and Cygnus would beat Ming and Terra Turtle. Then Smidsy would beat Lean Streak, Cygnus would beat Hellbent, and Smidsy would beat Cygnus in the Heat final. I've also just realised that Bigger Brother's Heat is unaccounted for. Oh god, I may have messed up here. Wow, I did not plan this very well. Oh god, this is giving me a headache. So how would I fix this? Actually, wait, no, never mind. This is an easy fix. Okay, so let's have Atomic and Bigger Brother swap places. So Bigger Brother would be in the same heat as Smidsy, so yeah, ignore what I said about Ming. So the Ming would still replace Zorro, or Ming wouldn't enter at all. So in which case, Bigger Brother would win Smidsy's heat, because yeah, Bigger Brother and Smidsy would beat Cygnus and Terra Turtle. Bigger Brother then beats Hellbent, and there is a good chance Bigger Brother will beat Smidsy, so yeah, Bigger Brother wins that. There we go, easily fixed. So yeah, Heat K, that would be Exterminator's heat, so Exterminator wins that. And N2 wins Heat L. Raging Nightmare wins Heat M. Gravity wins Heat N. God, I'm losing track. Firestorm wins Heat O, and oh yeah, Atomic is in the same heat as Typhoon, so yeah, Atomic and Typhoon 2 would win, beat Colossus and URO. Atomic then beats Iron Ore 2.1, and then the Heat final is, well, this plays out the same way as if they fought in the semi-finals in the actual timeline, and Typhoon 2 defeats Atomic and goes through to the semi-finals. So yeah, basically Razor and Bigger Brother are in the semi-finals instead of St. Aggro and Atomic. So now I'd have to figure out who'd face whom. Okay, so because Exterminator is in semi-final 1 and M2 is in semi-final 2, we would have it so that Razor faces Exterminator instead of St. Aggro, and Bigger Brother faces M2 instead of Atomic. So semi-final 1, here's what would go down. Razor would beat Exterminator, Tornado beats Raging Nightmare, Gravity beats Danton Kier, and Bulldog Breed beats Tough as Nails. So, very similar way to before. Then Razor would face Gravity and beat it, because I don't see a situation where Gravity would come out on top there. And Tornado would beat Bulldog Breed. I mean, Bulldog Breed might put up a decent fight, but I'm not sure it would beat Tornado, even if it flips it over. Tornado would more likely use the scoop with the flail on it, but against robots with a really flat side, Tornado could still push it. So yeah, Tornado will more likely win here. Of course, could be the same if the fights were switched. I mean, Tornado would beat Gravity like in the actual timeline, and Razor would beat Bulldog Breed. So yeah, in the other semi-final, it plays out in a similar way. Firestorm beats Mute, Typhoon 2 beats Thermidor 2, Storm 2 beats the Grim Reaper, and this time we'd have Bigger Brother facing M2, but I feel like Bigger Brother is more likely going to win against M2, because I don't think M2 would be able to flip Bigger Brother that easily. So yeah, Bigger Brother would more likely come out on top here. So then Storm 2 would beat Firestorm, just like in the actual timeline. Then Bigger Brother will face Typhoon 2 for the last place in the grand final. Now, I know they did fight each other in the actual timeline in the very first round, but not head to head. And I don't know whether or not Bigger Brother would be able to flip Typhoon 2 right away. I know at this point Typhoon 2 was slow to start spinning, and I think because Atomic flipped itself over, I think Typhoon 2 got a bit lucky, but Bigger Brother isn't able to flip itself over here. I mean, I guess it would try and flip a Typhoon 2 out the arena, but then it would, I don't know, I think it would get up to speed eventually. I mean, Bigger Brother would have to get at the right angle to be able to flip Typhoon 2. I know it did in the first round, but then again, that was the first round, and you know, URO and Colossus were eliminated already. But I'm just not sure Bigger Brother would be able to catch Typhoon 2 in time. I think Typhoon 2 would just rip Bigger Brother apart and go through to the grand final. So yeah, the grand final lineup is almost the same, only obviously Razor is there instead of Exterminator. So yes, the lineup would be near enough the same. Storm 2 would beat Tornado, and yeah, Razor would just get ripped apart by Typhoon 2. And like I said before, whether or not there's a playoff depends on how healthy Razor would be. So yeah, if it's not, then Tornado would win by default. If it is, yeah, Razor wins. Yeah, the anti-pit device frame thing wouldn't be allowed, even though in this timeline it would have only made one appearance, which was in the European Championship. Of course, it doesn't matter either way, since this would have been the last series until the show gets revived in 2016, and then yeah, the grand final plays out the same way, with Typhoon 2 winning. So yeah, this is basically what would happen if Wild Thing beat Hypno-Disc in the Fourth Wars. So much would change. Bigger Brother doesn't make it to the semi-finals in Series 5 and 6. Hypno-Disc becomes the Series 5 champion, Razor becomes the Series 6 champion, Atomic becomes a much more successful robot, getting 2 grand final placings, but Typhoon 2 still wins Series 7. Yeah, this was badly prepared, but yeah, I apologise for that, but there we go, we do have an answer. And I'll cover Wild Thing in the next Robot Wars What If again, but you'll just have to wait and see what it is. Thanks for watching.